Morning. We're going to begin now a Sikha in the Kuta Sikhis. This is printed in Chelek Chav Beis, volume 22, Tazriya-מצורע, page 70. The Rebbe says, Aleph, the Parshas Tazriya-מצורע is an later kfiyas for Rev Hashanim, Ala Shanim Shutis Mechubaris. In most years, in other words, all the years that there's no leap year, the Parshas of Tazriya and Metzora are always joined together. The Kisher v'shayches zwischen die zwei Seders is verstandig bepashtas. The connection between the two Parshas is understood. It's obvious. Neisef of them was in beide Seders retzich wegen Nigoim, in Parshas Tazriya, Nigi Adam, and Nigi Begadim, and in Parshas Metzora, Nigi Batim. So in addition to Parshas Metzora, which speaks about the nigoyim of a person's flesh and his clothing, and a Parshas Metzora describes the tzaras on the walls of the building. So both Parshas speak about tzaras. Nor Nochmer. In addition, Parshas Metzora is the siyum v'choisef on Parshas Tazriya. Parshas Metzora is the conclusion of Parshas Tazriya. The dinya Metzora wegen welches retzich be Parshas Tazriya is siyumam teiras ha-Metzora b'yem taras in Parshas Metzora. So Parshas Tazriya describes the halacha of a person getting taras. And what does Parshas Metzora say? Parshas Metzora describes the purification on the day that he's purified. So it has a connection. Parshas Metzora is like a sikha, is a culmination. It's a siyum for Parshas Tazriya. The Rebbe says, we need to understand in regards to the names of the Torah readings. We get schein viel mal sein die Namen von die Sedres nicht als Simen Ba'alma, a Wort von Aschals HaSedra wird genutzt, bloß bei auszuteilen in Sedra, ein Sedra von der andere. Nor jeder Namen anhalt und drückt aus, wie alle chemische Nikren bei ihm Lashon HaKodesh in die Kudas HaTeichen von der Sedra. So, we mentioned numerous times that the names of the Parshas are not just titles, words chosen from the beginning of the Torah, and just to differentiate between the two names. Rather, all the names in Lashon Kodesh, they embody and express a fundamental theme of that parsha. The Rebbe says in the brackets, when we das is euch mudgish for Parshas Tazriya. This is also stressed in Parshas Tazriya. As leit minig Yisrael heißt sie nit Isha, chotsch das ist der erste Wort nach der Psychit Klalis Veidaber Hashem Gomer Lemer. So, l'chayra should be called Parshas Isha, right? What is it? Veidaber Hashem Amesh Lemer. Isha ki Tazriya. We don't call it Parshas Isha, we call it Parshas Tazriya. Aber mit welches hebt sich an kame Parshas in Torah. Es does nicht a nomen speziell von der Parsha, nor a nomen is Tazriya. So, like we said, that the Parsha is not Parshas Isha, rather we call it Parshas Tazriya. So the Rebbe says, Fad zechaber abir benidin didam. In our case, we need to understand. Was is the shayches from the word nomen Tazriya to the Parsha bechlalusa? So, first of all, we have to understand what's the connection in Parshas Tazriya to the whole Parshas Tazriya. Parshas Tazriya means when a woman will give birth. And Nigoyim are blemishes. So what's the connection between giving birth and a blemish? And the Rebbe says, Nachmer, nit blois hat der Wort Tazriya kein shayches nit zu dem inyan ha-Nigoyim. Not only does the word Tazriya not have a connection to what goes on in the Parsha, but wie is Mefurish Parsha saying, so it says l'chayra, seien sie havchim. Seemingly they have very opposite themes. Tazriya weist, wie das is Mefurish Parsha saying, isha ki Tazriya v'yoldo gemer. So Tazriya means when a woman conceives and gives birth. Oifan inye was bringt a hilad chadasha un chayim chadashim, which means Tazriya has a connection with birth, bringing new life into being. Shenke Nigoyim is doch mitzeda chashiv kemes. However, Nigoyim, tzaras, is, like the Gemara says, somebody who is afflicted with tzaras is considered like a dead person. And the pshat therefore is as das is nitna or tumas hamitzera, and this doesn't only mean impurity, nor the mitzera atzmi is chashuv kames. It doesn't only mean that somebody is he has impurity, so he resembles somebody who's like endangered by a mess. But rather, a person who is a mitzera is mamish considered as a dead person. So that's in Tazria itself, the name and the theme of Tazria, l'cheira, doesn't reflect, and it's adrab, it's the contrary. Tazria means you're giving birth, it's a new life, and in Tazria it speaks about negoyim, which is chashiv kemes. Oich is moving b'negei mitzera. So the Rebbe says also the term mitzera is also not understood. Al Shem Parsha is the name of the Parsha. In Parshas mitzera retzich nit wegen dem mitzera als mitzera, prate negoyim shaboy und sein toma, nor verkehrt wegen tahara sei, es wird ois mitzera. Kann schön hereinkommen bei sich am Machane und bringen seine Karbonas v'chuli. So, what does Parshas Mitzera speak about? Parshas Mitzera speaks about not the actual blemishes, but the opposite, the purification of a person with that tzaras. How he ceases to be classified as a Mitzera, which enables him to actually go into the Machane and to bring Karbonas. So the question is, why do we call it Parshas Mitzera, a name which refers to the afflicted person, but rather than the purification? So the Rebbe says, "V'afalpi as nachtem in der Seder Retzach wegen nigei botem." Now, even though later on in the Parsha, Mitzera speaks about tzaras blemishes that appear on the building, so the L'cheira does speak about tzaras. The Rebbe says, number one, it's not movement, it's not understood. Or is it glatik, I should say. It's not so straightforward. Aleph. In Parshas veren nigei botem nit nichla in the move and hapasha from Mitzera. So, first of all, tzaras, blemishes that appear on the wall of the building, are not like included in the simple understanding of the term Mitzera. Mitzera means that the person's body is afflicted. And the chayra, in the negoyim that we're talking about in the Parsha is nigei botem. Beis, Nachmer, even more so. By the nigei botim is the adgosha nit in the nigoim kishel atzum als in bilti ratzi nor Rashi was in Yonis Pshuto Shemikra bring gleich herab oiven asati negat saras beseira hilahem shanigoyim boyim aleim fishit minu amiroyim vayideh nega neit tzabayit mitzim. Now the blemishes that appear on the walls of the building is not blemishes in Parshas Mitzera that have a negative factor. But Rashi says that Hashem says, I'm going to place the blemish upon the building, that it's a good thing, it's a psura teva, because blemishes appear on the wall, and the Amoraim, the Emiraim, the people from Emirites, hid treasures of gold inside the wall, and as a result of the blemish, a Yid will demolish his house and discover the gold. So that's what the Parsha is speaking about in Mitzera. So first of all, Parshas Mitzera, which means that it's afflicted, that the body's afflicted with tzaras. Number one, in the Parsha speaks about B'yem Tarase, how he gets better, how he's purified. So you're going to say that there's nigei batim over there? Number one is that Mitzera means the Parshas, when you think about Mitzera, you think about how the person's body is afflicted. And number two is, in the nigei batim, it's not speaking about Mitzera in a negative factor, but rather it speaks about how the Mitzera will be rewarded, and this is Hashem's way of bringing reward to the Mitzera. Mashenki Mitzera is adrab lifyam bevor Pirish Rashi do Baruch Medrash Chazal auf Chil's Parshas Sinne wegen dem Chisarn in Einish von Mitzera, als das ist verbunden mit den Linien von Lashon Hara v'Gasarura. Mashenki. By contrast, Rashi explains here, and the Chacham elaborate that the purpose of and what's going on about tzaras with the name of Mitzera, that is connected with more of gossip and arrogance. So the Rebbe says, "Ich darf verstehen, was mir gefindt zwei Shemes von der Sedre. Minig Yisrael, und als wird sie angerufen in der Torah v'Shulchan Aruch, ist zu rufen ihr Mitzera. Aber in Rasag, Pirish Rashi und Rambam wird sie angerufen Zeis Tia. Was is der Tam achilik from the zwei shittas? So the Rebbe says we have to understand the Torah, the readings this week. We have two names, and in Minig Yisrael, the Jewish custom refers to Metzera, and it's brought down in Torah and Shulchan Aruch that we call it Parshas Metzera. Now, however, the Rasag is Reb Sadia Goin, and Rashi and the Rambam refer to this parsha not as Parshas Metzera, but rather Parshas Zois Tia. So what is the reason for the difference between the approach of Shulchan Aruch and the approach of Rasag, Rashi, and Rambam? Okay, base. So let's say it's possible to offer the following explanation. Behaktim, as a preface, Einer von the Yesodis HaEmunah is, one of the fundamental principles of our faith is the inyan von schar v'einish, the concept of reward and punishment. Ubelashon HaRambam, as the Rambam says in Parshas Mishnayos, like the Rambam says in his Parshas Mishnayos, that what does he say? HaYisoid HaYud Aleph ki hu Hashem Yisbarach Neisen Sochar l'misha oiseh mitzvahs HaTorah v'yanish l'misha over al hazarasei v'chi hasochar hagodol elam haba v'inish hachazek kares. The Rambam says that the 11th fundamental principle is that Hashem grants a reward to a person who fulfills the mitzvahs of the Torah and punishes one who violates its prohibitions. The greatest reward is receiving Olam Haba, the world to come, and the most severe punishment is Kares, which means the soul being cut off and not receiving a portion in Olam Haba. The Rambam further elaborates this in the text of Mishnah Torah in Hilchos Tshuva. Okay, so the Rebbe says like this. So Torah, what's the idea? What's a big fundamental principle? Is the idea of reward and punishment. Hashem gives reward to somebody who keeps his Torah and punishes ones who doesn't. Now, the Rebbe says Torah is doch Torah's chesed. Torah, we know, is called the Torah of kindness. Let's move on, so it's understood. As euch die oinshe ha-Torah sein nit l'shem oinish chas v'shalom, nor the tikkun far nefesh ha-choyta. So, the penalties that the Torah has is not for the sake of punishment, but rather to rectify the sinner's neshama. U'kamayim Razal, as the Razal tell us, chayve krisa shelaku niftru yidei krisasam, those who are liable for karas, but receive malchus for whatever reason, so they're exempt from krisis. So we see that the idea of a punishment is in order to rectify something. Razal zogen by Ochen, Ya'akorcha Hashem b'yem hazeh ata ochor v'yata ochor le'elam haba. So this concept also is regarding the punishment of Misas Beis Din, which is execution by the Beis Din. And the Gemara says that regarding Yeshua's statement prior to the execution of Ochen, so he said, "May Hashem darken you on this day." Ya'akorcha Hashem b'yem hazeh. And the Gemara learns out, on this day you will be darkened, but you will not be darkened in Elam haba. So we see the idea of Einish and Torah is not just done for the sake of punishment, but it's for a reason. Or by Rev and She'atera is that men nit begolei as das is gor l'tevasan shaladam. Nevertheless, it's not apparent by most of the Torah punishments that it's for the sake of the person's benefit in Elam. So we don't see that the punishment is for the sake of the person's benefit in this world. However, according to the Rambam, we can see openly that the tzaras blemishes are for the benefit of the afflicted person. And the punishment of tzaras serves as an example for which it can be derived that the same applies regarding all the punishments by Torah. Okay, so basically what we accomplished in Beis, we said that one of the fundamental principles is schar and einish, and Torah is a Torah of kindness. So whenever there's a schar or I should say there's a einish, it's for a purpose. It's not just to hurt somebody or to Hashem is letting His wrath out on somebody. It's for a purpose to bring him to a better place. Now, you don't really see that really in any punishments in Torah. By negat tzaras, and we're going to explain soon, you mamish see that idea. Okay, Gimel. The Rambam zog b'sei Hilchos Tumas Tzaras. The Rambam concludes at the end of Hilchos Tumas Tzaras. Rambam says, "V'zeh hashinei ha'omer bebegadim ubebatim shekaratu Torah tzaras b'shutafes Hashem einay min hagei shel olam. Ela ois v'fela hayu b'Yisrael k'dei lahaziram b'lashon hara shamasar b'lashon hara mishtana is kiris beisei." The Rambam says that this change mentioned that affects clothes and houses to which the Torah referred with the general term of tzaras is not a natural occurrence. Instead, it's a sign that existed amongst the Jewish people to warn them against lashon hara and to speak malicious gossip. And he says that when a person speaks lashon hara, that shamasar lashon hara mishtana is kiris beisei. That when a person speaks lashon hara, the walls of the house change color. Im chazer boy yitar habayis. If he does tshuva, the house will be purified. Im amad b'rishay. If, however, he persists in his wickedness, so then if he persists in his wickedness until the house is destroyed, and mishtanis kliya or shebebesi, the leather in his house changes colors. If he persists in his wickedness, so then they are burnt. So the clothes he wears changes colors. Im chaser by yitarov. Im amad berisha she used for mishtan erev dara v'yem muvdom before from the vade at shelo yisasik b'sichas arashayim shol yitzonas v'lashon hara. So he says, if he does tshuva, they will be purified. If he persists in his wickedness, so until the Torah requires that they be burnt, his skin undergoes changes and develops tzaras. This causes him to be isolated, and for it to be made known that he must remain alone, so that he will not be involved in lashon hara, or in the talk of wicked, which is characterized by lashon hara. So the Rebbe says this. Das heißt, what does this mean? That Eibishter macht ashine miyuchad in der bria, die lachzira melashon hara. Was the fun is there say there as der Eibishter bringt as der shine frier in the bottom, danach eichen begotten. Zu Mazer sein die Yidden zu menakal lakove zu sein abgehit von lashon hara. So the Rambam is saying that Hashem brings like a unique change in the natural order to warn the Jewish people against lashon hara. Therefore, it's Hashem brings first the change in the walls of the building, then the garments, so the Yid will be warned. The signs begins with a lesser situation, and then to more of a severe one, all in order to guard a person against lashon hara. An euch der Hesger von dem Tzeira-Atzmi, was wird getonnen an Eifen, she moved them before the Levade, but the Yeshem b'chutz l'machna mishavai, is met the matara as does all if im poil shleis asik b'sichas harishayim shu alitzonis v'lashon hara. Also, this that he's in confinement, which a person is afflicted with tzaras, and he has to be isolated, he has to be in quarantine, and he has to be alone, he shall dwell alone outside the camp where he lives. This was all enacted with the purpose that he will not be involved in the talk of the wicked, which again is characterized by mockery and lashon hara. Okay, we'll Mitzvah Hashem continue Dalet. I'm going to do that by the Gemara.